Regularly scheduled September 16th work study is called to order. Would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Well, thank you everyone for being here tonight. I'm out of breath because I just came from South Kitsap High School. They're having a town hall meeting tonight, and our own Chief Martai was the chief speaker and the first speaker. As a matter of fact, he just finished a little while ago. He was speaking on school security and safety, and he did a great job. And in a way, I'm sorry that we can't all be there to hear the town hall meeting portion where we'll get questions from the citizenry. But anyhow, just want you to know, Chief Martai really did a good job. He got their attention, delivered the message, and he's got a really fine partnership going with the Sheriff's Department and the school district. So I'm pretty tickled about that. That was just an unscheduled advertisement. But, okay, now I added legal services because that's been a topic of discussion the last couple of days, but I added it right at the last minute because I've got some new information that came in today. But I would like to switch number 1 and number 2 and bring number 2 back up to the number 1 position, and that is Lodging Tax Committee recommendations. And because I know I see a lot of familiar faces that are probably here for that, and of course you're welcome to stay afterwards to hear anything else you'd like. So Fred, you want to take it away and let's go right into the lodging tax and get
Sure.
that out of the way?
Yes, I'd actually like to invite Frank Graziani to come and join us in case he has anything to add.
Okay.
Frank was one of the members of the committee, and we have 2 others, Jesse and Bobby, also with us. I don't know if you guys, I think Frank's sort of the spokesman for the committee.
We can make room.
Well, as you can see, I think everybody got a copy of what's on the board here. And we had a little more money than we had last year, which was kind of nice, so we could give out a little more. And we kind of changed our process a little bit this year. Last year, we struggled for several meetings trying to decide. This year, everybody on the committee turned in a paper with the amount that they suggested every recipient got, and then it was all averaged out, and it came out to an average. And then after we got an average for every one of these, I believe it's 13 requests, then we talked about how much the average was and whether we thought it was appropriate for that particular requestee. And so as you can see, not everybody got what they wanted, but we come close, and we did keep the 12,000 for reserve as we kept the reserve last year. So I think we've done pretty good. Have given everybody money. Last year there was a couple that didn't give money. This year we made sure everybody got it. So it's up to you guys, or you folks, to approve it or whatever you want to do. But we're kind of happy with it. If anybody's got any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer.
Was there any indication? I know last year when Visit Kitsap spoke to us, we kind of an all or nothing
Yes.
request from them, and what will this $5,600 do for with Visit Kitsap?
We would have loved to have had an answer from Patty Graf Hoke.
Yeah.
She spoke at great length but did not answer. We also got mixed messages because we know they applied to the council for additional funding. So this year it seemed like they got, I think, more than they did last year, or initially they did last year.
They asked for less this year too.
A little less this year.
Yes.
Fred, could you explain the funding allocated at 120 and the projected revenues at 76, how that works out?
Actually, I'll let Ellen explain that. We were, the high level that we were told was that it was 76 was projected, but we had a combination carryover higher projection for 2014 That was the additional 43,000. Was that the right amount? Anyway, it totaled 120. Oh, thank you. Yeah, this figure. Yeah, 76 was 43. That's how we came up to 120, which is what we had to allocate. And we were advised that we should keep 10% in reserve, and that's exactly what they did. I didn't actually put in any figures. I just let committee members put in figures. And we got figures for 7 out of the 8 participants. One was not able to give us any input.
I want to make sure I understand the procedure, Brandy. When I read the other information you handed out, gave us a little bit earlier today, the way I read it, we can choose not to fund a particular line item, but the amount that has been recommended is the amount that we have to fund the particular organization.
Correct. So the numbers recommended by LTAC committee cannot be changed. You can accept it, not accept it, but you can't change it.
Yeah, we can't change it. We can
So-
accept it or not accept it.
Right, but the way I read it, we could accept line items.
Correct.
Reject line items.
If it's on the list, you can go one by one and either accept the funding amount recommended or not. But if you don't accept the funding amount, then they get no funding.
We had the sheets that we were provided by the AWC. and
I'd be happy to read it to you if it makes sense for me to read.
Yeah, no, I read what you
Okay.
had sent us today, and I just wanted to make sure that I was clear in how I read it.
Yes.
Any other questions or comments, or?
Could you explain a little bit about the difference between Explore Port Orchard and POPSA?
You want me to do that?
Yeah, if you can.
Explore Port Orchard is kind of members of several groups that have come together and are going to basically do about what Visit Kitsap does, only for just Port Orchard. It's a group that is going to push Port Orchard with pamphlets. They're going to put pamphlets on the ferry. There are going to be a consortium of advertising more than anything for Port Orchard. And that's why we did give them money, because they are going to be Port Orchard's main advertisement.
And Explore Port Orchard is a coalition similar to what Paulsbo's done with 5 of their nonprofits. I have a signature sheet where it has 5 of them actually signing off that they're willing to participate. Many of the requests actually lowered their individual ask because they wanted the portion they would ask for advertising to go to Explore Port Orchard. And it's their way to collectively coordinate. For example, instead of 4 one-page ads, they could maybe get the center insert. So they're trying to coordinate their efforts, both in terms of picking dates, but also in getting maybe better advertising on print and I guess radio.
So are we duplicating services by funding Visit Kitsap, POPSA, and then the individual ones and the Explore Port Orchard? I mean, it seems like there's a lot of overlap.
Actually, the short answer would be no. They, as you'll see from their application, that they asked for different things. One of them, I think, Fathoms has their own type of advertising. They do the floats, but they also lowered their ask. Let's see, Beck, you probably know a little more about Explorer. If you can fill in the gaps of what I'm
Yeah, Explore
leaving
Port
out.
Orchard is a coalition of nonprofits. It includes the POBSA, it includes the port, it includes the Sydney Museum, it includes Fathoms of Fun, the Chamber of Commerce, and the city has a seat at the table too, although the city hasn't contributed any money. But they do joint advertising, such as this last year, they put a double page ad, or the year before, like 3 or 4 different ads were purchased for Discover Kitsap, that magazine. And they were small, like quarter-page ads. So this last year, they went together and they got a full-page back ad. And they all put in less money than they did for their quarter page, and they got a much better advertisement. That's the type of things they're doing, and they are right now putting together a brochure with a map for South Kitsap and Port Orchard. So it's the collective advertising. So there's a difference between what, let's say, the chamber may advertise just chamber things. How do I want to word this? But they do collective, they reduce their ask for things that they will fund or Explore Port Orchard will do. Take the seagull calling contest, for example. Collectively, they can do bigger and better for that. So that's the type of things they're doing. And I did not see, and I have not read the pamphlet, so I heard the
I actually
application,
recommend
so-
that you get the
Yeah, I don't know
pamphlets, 'cause
exactly what
it has
they
a better
asked for.
breakdown than my memory to tell you what they were at.
Yeah, one of the
Asking
things that Chris Stansberry told us, and she's kind of ramrodding that, is that they will be the source for a lot of organizations like our car club, for one, to go to and be able to pass this information to, like, Visit Kitsap, or all the organizations saying there's going to be a car show at this time, or would the Fathoms have something going. So it'll be somebody that can really put out the information as to what's going on in Port Orchard at that time to all the organizations.
But isn't that what the chamber does?
Yes,
Yeah.
kind of, but not like they'll be able to do it, because these Visit Port Orchard's going to be made out of people from all these organizations that are putting on different events.
The biggest overlap that I saw actually was between Explore Port Orchard and Visit Kitsap, because they're both doing sort of extra, out of the area type of advertising. But Explore Port Orchard, which is being spearheaded, as opposed to ramrodded, by Chris Stansberry, she actually felt that we needed Visit Kitsap for their type of marketing to Seattle and maybe out of the state. But she felt that one of the gaps with Visit Kitsap, and she wasn't criticizing, was that they do well at their marketing, but they need someone to provide them the information that they're going to put on their website. And this coalition or Explore would be the sort of coordinator, giving people sort of a one-stop information on all the different tourism events. I also struggled with, in the past I thought that the chamber should be our tourism coordinator. But the chambers had, with every different board, they have a different philosophy. They've had boards that have actually felt that tourism was not important to the chamber's goal, which was to get more members and increase business and retention. I think the current chamber makeup is actually very supportive of tourism, but they are not able to be the one-stop tourism coordinator. And I'm actually excited that someone's actually stepped up to not to make all the nonprofits, but to allow the nonprofits to work together. In Paulsbo, it's been very interesting that they had to do it, and I think they've learned to do it very well. When Becky Erickson decided that she'd allocate a certain amount to the coalition, as she calls them. So this is sort of our version of the coalition.
And just another question is, I'm not sure what the plan is for any of these, but, with the new organization, how do you measure their results? What will be success?
I think you would benefit from reading their application. They admit that since they are a new entity, that they don't have an existing budget or track record. But I'm actually really excited that we have this sheet of, also the Port of Bremerton. This is the signature sheet. So I think it shows a willingness for them to work together. And we have 3 of the 5 here.
My thought is also that you fund it and see what happens. And then the funders themselves will be back, most of them, again next year, and they're the ones that will vet the success or failure. They'll say, this worked really well for the rest of us, or we didn't get what we thought, and we don't want to fund it as much. So, yeah, I think that the 8 members are the most important people in the room as far as vetting these things as time goes on, you know.
Brett, I just have a question, just because they're new, and I haven't had the opportunity to read their packet or requests, but is this their entire proposed budget, or are these other entities kicking in towards their effort?
For Explore Port Orchard, that was their entire budget.
So we would be funding
Well,
100% of their activity?
Or what?
I don't think so.
Oh, you mean they'd have other funding or what?
I believe that their ask for and I haven't read it either, but I believe their ask for LTAC money was for advertising outside of Port Orchard. And if they did collective advertising for, again, for the groups, that was saying the Port Orchard Independent, that would not be part of this, that the groups will kick in, still participate for local advertising, and this is just for the outward reach. That's my understanding.
But this would be 100% of their budget for the outside of the area reach?
I believe so. I'm going to share. I didn't hear the full question, John.
This 16,000 that is being allocated, would that be the entire budget that this organization or coalition would have? Yeah. Or are these other nonprofits like Port of Bremerton, are they contributing to this outside effort?
Yes, Fountains has committed to 1,000
Okay.
for that, based on our budget and our needs that we have. We did commit to 1,000 to help fund Explore Port Orchard to advertise collectively.
Do you know if any of the others had? Like-
COPSA, I believe, is 2,500.
I think on the,
Well, I don't care about the dollar amount, but they've committed
Yes.
funding
They've all
to this.
committed to that.
yeah, on the back of their application is a detailed budget of what they're planning on doing, and it should say what their other revenue sources are besides LTAC funds being requested. I don't have the packet in front of me, but I know that they did submit a budget.
I have everybody's but Explore. I must have left it at home.
Cindy has it.
No. Oh, here it is. Okay. I'm sorry.
In doing our interview with Chris, one of the things that she did say was this budget is an estimate right now, because we're not quite sure they want to know. Am I correct on that, Sharon?
Yes.
So,
Actually, no. This would be their sole source of revenue. At least according to this page here. And it lists their expenditures. Yeah, that's the same page.
Yeah,
And the idea was that each of the nonprofits was going to cut down their original requests and sort of give a portion over to Explore Port Orchard. And I think, I forget which one, some of them very visibly did that. It might have been the Chamber and the Sydney Museum. I think each asked for about 5,000 less than prior years. But that was the idea for how they were sort of sacrificing to form this organization.
The Port Ferry, how much is Bremerton and the port giving?
It's the same amounts as last year. Our contribution is higher though because we asked. We're also giving an amount for promotion of it, promotion of the Foot Ferry.
So how much are they giving?
The same amount that they did last year. I don't remember. No,
So
the Port of
55 for the
Bremerton,
port?
and the county are all assumed to be giving the same amount that they did last year.
So, yeah, Port will well, I haven't asked them, but we're projecting that hopefully they'll do the same, 5,500 for next year. City of Bremerton, 6,500. City of Port Orchard, 6,500, and then we're hoping the county will contribute 4,000 like they did
Yeah,
this
the
year.
same as this year, the same amounts.
But that's not confirmed.
Well, no, because we haven't asked them.
Right, we have that, okay. But
And
we're-
they don't have
that's
their,
the
yeah,
estimate, yeah. Okay.
they're not all doing it at the same time that we're doing it.
I don't think I could vote for this the way it's structured, and I know that we want to promote and market our town, but I don't know that everybody has to promote and market the town to the point where we have, I think 4 of these, there's over 50,000. And Visit Kitsap has a minimum level of what they want to, what they feel is necessary in order to be fair with all the other cities, so that everybody's paying a like amount. And I know that 56 isn't anywhere close to what they would like, so there's a problem with that one. Another thing that would really help, for me, this is kind of the way my mind works, is I'd like to know what these organizations spent their money on last year.
I hope you get copies of the applications. 'cause
I've actually seen some
I
of
think
that,
that
but it
will
doesn't
help.
tell us what they spent their money on.
You mean other than their,
Like,
There's-
how much was marketing and who they paid it to. I mean, we're trying to evaluate whether this is a good use of the citizens' money. And to do that, when you come back in, you just said it earlier, well, next year we'll be able to look and see how Explore Port Orchard did. Well, this is the next year for these other organizations, not Explore Port Orchard. And so it would be nice to know how they did, what did they do with that money? And is there really a lot of duplication of efforts? Is a lot of it going into brochures and 2 organizations put out brochures? Or, I don't know, because I don't have that information. But I know looking at this, it seems extravagant, and it seems there seems to be a duplication. The other thing I kind of think is the reserve, or the money that is carrying over, there's no better time than when you want to build up a reserve and have money set aside for things. And I can think of a lot of things on the Bay Street pedestrian pathway where there's the new bridge and providing enhancements for that, or benches, or lighting here and there, that where we can promote the city through our parks and through our trail. If we had this money set aside, then the city could use it for things that, if we sat around here some other time, we would wonder, well, can we really afford to do that? Well, in some ways we can, if we use this money wisely. So I've always felt like this money is precious, and that we should, use due diligence in how it goes out the door, and then have measures of, for example, the foot fair. I can remember 1.5 years or 2 years ago when this first started, I asked Don, well, how will we know success? What will it look like? And the answer wasn't exactly clear, but I know from what we did last year that it's a significant amount of money per passenger to do this kind of service. And we don't even know which way they're going. We don't know if they're going from Port Orchard to Bremerton, or
Yes.
from Bremerton. How do you know?
Because of what ferry they get on.
We have a spreadsheet, we will have a spreadsheet.
Well, I've never seen that spreadsheet ever.
Oh.
That shows
Brandy's
that
provided
information.
stuff to us, but it may
I've
not
seen
have the level of
spreadsheet,
detail that
but
you're
the
wanting.
spreadsheet has never shown which way they're going.
Well,
It's got the trip times.
it's
on
got
it,
the trip times on it.
which would-
If
So
they,
the hour and the half hour are leaving Port Orchard.
Okay,
and
so
the-
what is the answer to that question then? Which way are they going?
Well, you have to add them up.
No, I mean,
From the-
if this is being presented to us, then that's what I'm trying to say. If I'm asking, say, for some substantiation, those are the kind of numbers I'd like to know. Because, if half of them are going to Bremerton, or coming from Bremerton to Port Orchard, that's great. But if they're going from Port Orchard to Bremerton, and we're paying twice as much as everybody else, that isn't so great. That's just what I'm saying. Now, I know everybody wants to do everything we can to make our town better, and so do I. But I still think it should be done in a way that's prudent. That's all I'm saying.
well, it sounds like we will probably be voting on these items line by line, is what I'm hearing. As opposed to, fund them all or fund none of them. I think everyone will probably be voted on individually. And that's what we did last year.
Do we have the option of asking the committee to reconsider?
I think that's what we did last year.
It's my understanding you have to reject the proposal, and then it has to go back before the committee, and then I will double check on that process, because I don't know if you have to reopen the application or if it can be reconsidered, but you have to, you know, deny it, basically, deny the recommendation and go back, but, you know, they're gonna deliberate and bring back another recommendation.
Well, let's see, in general, it says a municipality doesn't have to make all the funds available. Any revenue remaining can be carried over future funding cycles. The law is silent on how often the awards should be made, annually, semi-annually, quarterly, etc. Some choose to make awards as part of their annual budget cycle, others make mid-year awards. Yes, I think the question though is, would we have to re-advertise it or not? That I don't know. We'll get that.
My look at this is, I know that the committee has gone to a lot of work. They have reviewed all of the applications. They have come up with these dollar amounts for, during their process, they came up with these dollar amounts. My personal bias is I want to see Visit Kitsap funded fully. I think that that's an important thing, and I would like to see them receive all of their $12,000. As far as the foot ferry is concerned, the city had been contributing $6,500 to the foot ferry for the summer Sunday and evening runs. And at an economic development committee meeting, I said we also want to think about advertising for the foot ferry and who is going to do that and assigning it. So I believe when the request for the foot ferry service went to the LTAC committee, they had added $5,000 onto the $6,500 for marketing. I think that is an excessive amount for that particular marketing campaign. And I think the money would be better spent at Visit Kitsap. I would like to see some for the marketing of the foot ferries, but I just think that that's a generous amount there. Those are the two that I have questions with.
Couldn't Explore Port Orchard market foot fair? That'd be a logical.
Yeah, and I don't know what was in their ask. I mean, I don't know what was in
I
their
don't know
ask.
either.
Yeah.
Randy, but isn't the way it's supposed to work, you can make overall suggestions, but you can't change dollar amounts?
No, that is correct.
Correct.
That's why I asked.
Yeah, I mean, you guys can discuss it, and then if you choose to reject it, it goes back to the committee, and the committee can discuss it again, and they're gonna bring back a recommendation based on what they've heard, or, I mean, they could bring back the same recommendation.
I can tell you back that, for example, regarding a Visit Kitsap, we had one of the, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. One of the votes was for the full 12,000. The largest motel that participated did not fund them a great deal. He gave them 1,800. So I think there's a disconnect between what the hotels feel actually brings heads and beds to their business versus what we feel Visit Kitsap is doing.
I
Our
have
committee-
opinions on that too,
Sure.
because we as a city don't provide Visit Kitsap with the information they need to adequately do what they need to do for us. The disconnect is communication between our events and Visit Kitsap, and that needs to be rectified.
That's Visit Kitsap for Port Orchard before, that's what they're going to do, is they're going to feed Visit Kitsap with information.
So, should we go line by line?
Well, we're not going to do it now.
We do that this evening, that's a.
Well, I would think so, wouldn't you want to do it?
That would be a vote. We wouldn't vote on it.
A vote,
No, we're not.
that's a vote.
Can you tell me the evaluation criteria again, what went in, how the committee came up with,
Louder.
School, I'm sorry.
Turn this around.
But there's, I was just interested in the evaluation criteria. Everybody had a score sheet or something like that, and, thank you.
We actually tried to streamline our form and asked for the same information. One of the things we talked about was we wanted the same kind of information. We wanted the same kind of financial information. Some people asked for their tax returns. We didn't ask for that. We asked for essentially a budget. And most of the applicants provided that when they could, yeah. Okay.
One thing I do recall is when a discussion maybe 2 years ago, whenever that was, when we were talking about the foot ferry, is that the agreement was made, the city would give a certain amount of money if it was marketed by, and at that time it was POPSA. And I remember that those funds given to POPSA, a substantial amount, was for the marketing of the foot ferry, and other groups were seeing that as well. So, you know, I'd like to go back and look at my notes and just see how much of that it was, but I recall, that was kind of the agreement that was made, is these other groups were gonna help to market that.
Right, and I remember that,
Uh-huh.
and I happened to be the marketing person at POPSA that particular year. And the only funds that LTAC paid for foot ferry marketing was that outside of our area. It was not the local marketing. POPSA paid for that itself. I don't know that that agreement carried forward to the next year. I don't know whether that commitment was there or not, because I was no longer the marketing person for POPSA.
Well, Fred, aren't these new each year?
We have new applications
Not
every year,
necessarily,
yes.
yeah, but so they may say we're gonna spend it this way this year, and we spend it that way last year, but it doesn't necessarily mean it carries, they'll do it the same way year after year.
I haven't compared the applications year to year, and that's certainly
you
something
remember
that's
that?
worth looking at.
Yeah.
To see what they've asked for and how they've actually. One thing we could also ask for, but I don't know how easy it is to get, is to see what each entity has been actually paid. As I understand it, they pay their bills and they submit them for reimbursement, and then we reimburse them. So we could ask for, is that correct, Brandy? We could possibly ask for their,
Yeah, everybody with the exception of Visit Kitsap seeks reimbursement based on receipts or checks.
so that might be another way to see how the money's actually spent.
It's useful to get an idea if we're overlapping too.
Would that be painful or? Yeah, okay.
And I do appreciate the work that the committee puts into it. I really do. It's a complicated process. So, not that I'm ungrateful in any way, but it just gives me a better idea too. You know, I know when anyone is in economic development or tourism, it can easily overlap. So, just getting an idea of, in general, how the city is doing with these dollars would be helpful to me. Even economic development. Your committee too.
Okay, so what's the next?
It comes to the next council meeting, and it sounds like to me it's gonna be voted on line item by line item to approve or reject the recommendation versus holistically.
Okay. Anything else, Fred?
No,
No?
thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll just be really brief on the new item. The reason it's a new item is I got some letters here. They're in your packet, and they were just put in your packet here about an hour ago. The first one is from Stephen DiGiulio, Foster and Pepper Law Firm, and it's an engagement letter that I've been talking to him about since the 11th, and he sent me a duplicate engagement letter. And my idea is that I, in fact, enter into this engagement letter with him to help us in the period of time until we select our next permanent law firm. And he would only be used in the case of more of a major nature of a lawsuit of some kind. You'll read through this stuff as you know, you have an opportunity before the council meeting, but you'll realize immediately that he gets quite a lot per hour. But this firm is worth every penny depending on what you need. The letter, engagement letter talks about that he won't have a retainer, so we won't pay if we don't use it. We'll only pay if we do use his services, and then that'll be, I assure you, very sparingly. We'll all have to pretty much say, yeah, that we better call him in. So anyway, that protects us over the short run on the bigger lawsuit type items. Now, on a daily basis, we need someone that covers this so that we can, you know, have our packets read by an attorney and blessed and said, okay, for form and function, this does what you want it to do. So for that element, I've contacted an attorney named Carol Morris, and her legal firm is Carol Morris, attorney, or let's see, what is
Morris Law.
Morris Law, and she's in Gig Harbor, and we have worked with her before. We've worked with her through AWC, and as a matter of fact, she's legal counsel for Ingley Outdoor Advertising. She was the lead counsel for that. We have worked with her on a couple of other occasions. Very, very knowledgeable gal. She, right at the present time, I had this laid out here somewhere. She's working for several small cities and providing them legal assistance. Shoot. Well, it's in the handouts there, and it's part of her legal service agreement. Or maybe, no, she's got a bio also. Yeah, Carol Morris bio on the very last page. Ruston, Black Diamond, Pacific, and Vader. She's now city attorney, providing city attorney services to those 4 small cities. So it's not like she's been in the business for 23 years. Morris Law, like I said, has a lot of experience. She is also works for risk management, AWC, and RMSA in her spare time. So she's definitely got all that I think we need in the interim. And then I'll be getting back to you, hopefully as early as the council meeting, to tell you what I propose that we do to start the search for the decision-making for a permanent solution. So, if there's any questions in the next week, I'd be more than happy to-
Mark, what were we paying McGavick Graves for our legal services on an hourly basis? What was 180, wasn't it?
This is off the top of my head.
I thought it was
The
175.
retainer was $8,000 a month, up to a number of hours. I believe it was 48 a month, but I'd have to recall that. And then over that amount, I recall it was $165.
65. So we're gonna pay Carol Morris 280, and the other firm wants 480?
No, I think Carol Morris is 200.
200?
Yeah, it's 200. The difference is there's no retainage on either one of these. So if we don't meet the retainage requirement, we only pay for the hours and minutes that we use. Okay, call me if you have a question on either one of these candidates for interim, temporary, not to exceed, I'm going to say not to exceed 6 months, but I don't feature that it's going to take us 6 months to make a decision. Like I said, I'll maybe bring something forward as early as next Tuesday on what I propose we do to have a search group. And then I want to include the council, I want to include citizens, and I want to include staff.
The only question I have is, not having read their proposals here, do you know if they would be willing to consider a retainer type of agreement? If
You don't need a retainer agreement with
Okay.
these,
well,
because a retainer is something you pay
right.
whether you use
Well,
it or
no,
not.
similar to the 8,000 that we paid for 48 hours of McGavick Graves. what would they consider if we wanted, you know, would we
Well,
get a discount
well,
rate?
read all the information, because on Foster Pepper, he's already gave us a pretty
Okay.
steep discount.
Well, no, it's just that based on the question that Rob brought up, if you're just comparing the hourly rate, it sounds higher, but that's not taking into consideration the retainer.
I believe we could typically exceed the
No.
retainer, did we
I'm
not?
Oh,
sorry, what?
We typically
Right.
exceed the retainer.
At a certain rate, yes, yeah.
Mhm.
But if we sort of guarantee them a certain amount of hours, could they give us, have you considered asking them that?
I would prefer you read both contracts before,
Yeah,
before we.
from my glance, I don't see retainer or anything like that. It seems
There isn't.
strictly an à la carte
Right.
hourly
Right.
rate. Okay.
Right. And my intention is to use the same system we've always used, and that's get a routing number. And the routing numbers will be very jealously guarded, as they have been the last few years, and we won't issue a routing number to, for a frivolous reason. You know, we just won't do that. We'll make sure that we're using it wisely. I do not foresee that I would exceed the budget that's already in place for this year, for 2014. Now, I don't have the exact figures that are left, and we won't have those until Mr. Jacoby sends us the closing bill. But at that point, I'll let you know what's still in the bank for services for attorneys. But I truly don't see us, unless something comes along, a major lawsuit that's not covered by our insurance, then anything can change. But there's nothing in the offing that I know that would raise to that level. So they'll do several things then. Give you a chance to read these over, bring this up for a vote on the next council meeting, get you some information, if you so desire, on what's left in the budget. And that, let's see, your question, read it first, and I think you'll understand why this is really a pretty good deal for an interim to give us the legal advice that we need, and yet we're not committing to an awful lot like we would be if we had a retainage. Anyhow,
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
What would you be asking us to vote on at the next meeting?
Actually, I'd like to hear from you before the next meeting, and then I'm going to go ahead and sign these. I don't believe you need to okay a temporary or an interim agreement.
That's why I asked.
Right.
What the
So-
vote would be.
Maybe just to give you a chance, I guess, scratch the vote, but I want to give you this week's chance to get a hold of me and ask any questions. And if you're opposed to it or whatever, please tell me why. And but I mean, you haven't had a chance to read them. We just got them today. They're both just printed out this afternoon.
Would it be possible, if you have, Mr. Martin, the hours that we have used the city attorney for, say, since the first of the year by month?
Oh, yeah.
Could you maybe provide that to the council so we have a feel for what the current usage level is? Thank you.
Okay. Anything else?
Well, so are we using both of them, or are we using one or the other?
No, we're using both.
Okay. Okay.
It's my intent to enter into the agreement with Foster Pepper for, actually, at this point in time, we don't have anything for them to do. And I'm hoping that the calendar runs out and we never have anything for them to do. But they have, this letter agreement says, if, in fact, something comes up, we can contact them and they'll go to work for us. And the same with the other one, although Carol there will be doing more of the day-to-day work, the checking, checking the code and checking those type of things, and making sure that everything we bring before the council has been gone over by an attorney. So I expect, Fred, that we'll see checks written here and none written here, at least as far as I know at this time. And it's my intent that neither of those, or any combination, exceeds what we have left for the budget for this year.
Before you tonight is a summary outlining an issue that we discovered and discussed last week at the Public Properties Committee meeting. Or was it Economic Development meeting? What has occurred, we're under contract to buy the property at 640 Bay Street. And as part of that, and given that we have an intern who has an architecture background working for us at the moment, I had him run some analysis on the development potential of that property as it relates to the downtown overlay district in our zoning code, so that we had an idea of what was possible as we go forward and figure out what to do with that property next. Just for your information, they're just finishing up the asbestos abatement, and they should be done by Friday. And then we're planning on moving forward with demolition, I think, as early as next week, as long as everything is in order. The issue that he brought to my attention, in which we discussed, is that the site has a mixed-use zoning designation, and the mixed-use zoning designation is primarily located in the downtown DOD area of Port Orchard, and it allows for 12 units per acre of residential development. And when we started thinking about this site and looking at the square footage, the zoning allows for nearly 100% lot coverage. I think depending on how tall the building is, you have to reduce the footprint. But with 10,000 square feet of land area, if you were to put a building on the entire property, which is I think what we try to encourage in the downtown, you're limited to only 3 residential units, which on a second floor of a building would be divided to about a 3,300 square foot unit, which I don't think there's a market for multifamily housing at that large of a size. So we looked at all of the other parameters that are in place for the downtown overlay, which height is allowed at 39 feet starting out and can go up to 55 feet with a conditional use permit, which means a 3 to 5 story building. But we didn't think that a 3 to 5 story building that was mixed use, consistent with the zoning with residential and retail, would be viable. However, there would be the possibility that you could have office uses above residential. So that's, you're not totally limited from developing something, but the market has to be there for office development versus residential development. Again, the lot coverage, 95% lot coverage is allowed. And then if you go above 3 stories or 39 feet in height, you have to start stepping the building back as you go up. But 95% of the lot can be covered. So that's sort of a limiting factor when considering what can be built. And then we also have a regulation that the apartments that you build have to be at least 600 square feet, so that you can't have these micro apartments that you see going in some really crowded areas in New York and in Seattle and other places. So, at least every unit has to be 600 square foot, which is pretty standard for like a studio or 1-bedroom apartment, I think. And then finally, parking is required, but per our ordinance, and this is not very detailed, but it says that you can pay a fee in lieu of construction of parking. So if you provide parking somewhere else and pay the city to develop that parking, you don't have to provide it on site. So parking, it is a restriction if you want it to be on site, but if you pay the city, which there's no framework in place for doing that at this time, you can get around that requirement. So what we concluded was that doing any type of mixed-use building where you have a ground floor retail type of setting with something above it probably isn't viable above 2 stories where you'd have 3 units on the second floor unless there's an office component of it or a parking deck. And it seems like the residential rent received is probably going to be the driver of any development. And at first glance, it just doesn't seem that 3 units on this site would make a viable project. I don't think you'd have many developers looking to build on this site, and I think that's probably discouraging development in other areas of the downtown. I think there's other issues with the downtown overlay district as well, but this is a major one that I don't think we've thought about real closely. And so I guess the question I wanted to pose to you, and maybe this was analyzed and this is what you want, but on a 10,000 square foot building footprint with a multi-story building, I mean, how many units do you feel it takes to make a viable project? And is this something we need to study further or come up with some other proposals? And I guess one thought is a lot of cities are going to what's called a form-based code, where you don't specify so much what goes in the building within reason, but you say, we want a building that looks like this, it's gonna be roughly this tall, it's gonna cover the entire site, it's gonna have, you know, a mix of uses, but you really talk about what shape the building is more so than the details of how you fill it out. And I think that, you know, the density requirement certainly, you know, does not result in the form that's allowed by your height limits and your lot coverage. So I just wanted to raise the issue for discussion.
Just a couple questions. One, what you're proposing is for all of the DOD and not just our site, correct?
Well,
Because I
yeah, I think there's
fair
a.
just to rezone our site and not.
Correct, there's a
look at-
structural issue with the regulations, I think, and I think that the mixed-use zone can be applied in other parts of the city, and as it stands at 12 units per acre, it may make sense elsewhere where you're gonna have surface parking lots. But where you don't have surface parking lots, it probably doesn't make a lot of sense the way it's set up.
I would agree.
Because I had asked him to bring the zoning map, because there are other places besides a DOD that's mixed use.
And the zoning map's actually over on the counter there, rolled up if we,
The other concern I have here is, and maybe I'm, the 100% site coverage, I'm okay with that, other than I believe what we intended in the DOD redevelopment is that we were gonna ask for a 10-foot sidewalk out front. And I think our sidewalk's currently 5 or 7 feet, and we want that, as
Yeah.
that site gets redeveloped, we're asking for it.
I think you may have
step-
12 feet at this location, but maybe not in other locations.
Okay, I
And
just
so,
wanna make sure we're getting that wider sidewalk, because that's
yeah.
on our frontage on Bay Street.
And I think when you look at more of a form-based type code, you actually just specify the building envelope all the way through your downtown, and in some areas, the setback may be different, but I think that maybe we need to look at this in terms of building forms rather than just trying to create a very simple zoning table that outlines how everything's going to be developed. But you can go into very limited detail when looking at this, or you can go into a lot of detail, which we obviously don't have a ton of resources to do this type of thing. But at a minimum, I think the density is the issue that's probably going to deter things from happening.
Don't believe that's what we intended when we did
No,
this.
it
but-
I don't think we.
I just want to say that I'm not in favor of making zoning changes with no specific developer or project in mind. And especially the mixed use where we take our limits and then start, you know, basically making them unlimited as we have in the case where maximum density is concerned. I'm also concerned about the premise that we can allow people to build a building and then they can, you know, provide parking, say, I guess a block or two away, I don't even know where it would be, but let's just say it's a couple blocks, maybe it's down towards West Bay or something. Well, those people are still gonna park on the street. And those street parking spaces are, I mean, this is a residential neighborhood right here. These people all have older homes with very little parking, like garages. Nobody has a double car garage, for example. Most families have 2 cars. To do that and then have these people in the apartments who don't want to drive 2 blocks to park their car and then walk back to their unit. They're just going to park on the street. And one of the big things when we talk about redevelopment of downtown is parking. Parking's huge. And so I'm not really in favor of that specific thing. And as far as buildings, building under the DOD, you know, I've never been a fan of the DOD, but Rudy made a pretty good job of it. And he was a couple stories tall, even though it's a remodel, I understand that. But it's still a commercial development that he did, and it has no residential units. So as for residential units, I think it'd be kind of nice to have some really nice residential units on top of a mixed-use building. However, not a lot of them. Just 3 actually would be fine with me. I don't think the developer would think that, but if a developer has a specific project and a specific concern and wants to come and apply for some kind of a waiver or whatever you call it to get special permissions, say, then I'd listen. But I don't think this opening it up to just trying to guess what some developer might want through some kind of thing that you've contacted somebody else. I mean, that's just one person, so I'm not actually
Our
Uh-huh.
I'm
challenge
in
to
favor
that,
of
though,
this.
is that if the developer doesn't have certainty in the process, they aren't gonna spend any money. and we're not gonna see any redevelopment.
Well, then we shouldn't have bought the building.
I'm talking anywhere in our downtown.
No, I don't think that's the case. I think
Because
the
if
money.
if the developer's not gonna come spend tens of thousands of dollars on engineering and design to not know if their project's gonna be approved. They won't do
Yeah,
it.
and legally, a project-specific rezone, I know our code allows them, but all the case law that I've ever read says that you're not supposed to engage in project-specific rezones, that you rezone a property before an application for development comes in.
When we talked about this, one of the thoughts that I had was what John and I had been hearing in transit, and that younger people want smaller units, and they don't care if they have a car or not, frankly. And one of the things that we talked about this specific project is how many potential units can go on that site if we rezoned. You know, does a 700 square foot apartment that's in a downtown corridor where there's several amenities to walk to, where you can walk to a bus stop, walk to a foot ferry to go to Seattle.
Speak up.
I'm sorry.
I can barely hear you.
I apologize. We talked about the size of the units and the potential to lure those young people that don't care to have a car that we keep hearing about in our other job. In that a unit or a bit. I thought it was. Is this one on?
Yeah.
Okay. I apologize. Been a long day. Talked about whether or not it made sense to encourage a rezone where we would have smaller units, more of them, that would encourage the younger people that don't want a car, that like that urban type of small setting that, you know, would be able to walk in the downtown area, walk to the bus stop, walk to the ferry to go to Seattle. Whether or not they park on the street, probably some of them will, some of them won't. But a smaller unit doesn't mean a large family, generally. You're talking singles. People are staying single longer. They're doing without these things. The demographics of America are changing, and that's a fact. And if we want to look at redevelopment of downtown, I would be in support of something more than calls for 3 units on a 10,000 square foot floor. That's a 3,300 square foot unit. You're not going to sell it. Nobody's going to build it because they're not going to sell it. Not in the middle of Port Orchard. They can't get rid of a 3,300 square foot unit in Alki Beach, let alone downtown Port Orchard. You got to make the units smaller so a developer can sell them and they'll be more affordable. That's just my sense on the whole thing.
The other concern, and I did a little bit more research tonight, is that the parking requirements, there is a parking requirement for residential units, and it's, depending on the size of the unit, it's 1.5 spaces per unit, 1.8, and I think up to 2 if it's got more than 4 bedrooms, or 3 bedrooms. But the downtown also has a retail parking component that says one parking space per 300 square feet of retail use. And so, you know, I don't know if that's the intent of the DOD either, is to have on-site parking for retail uses, because none of the buildings that we care about so much downtown provide any off-site parking.
My
So,
understanding, we had no requirement for retail.
as far as I can tell, it says in 2 places that the requirements of the parking chapter apply concerning the DOD, but it doesn't specifically change that. So that's another issue that I think is worth looking at. So anyway, I looked it up briefly tonight because I was trying to clarify the research that my intern had done, and it looked like it applied, but
A case in point here, and it isn't mixed use, but just east of here, you know, the Rockwell condos. They sell as fast as they come on the market. It's highly desired. They're 850 to 900 square feet, the units. They get very good rents. One of my tenants is a single nurse. Just speaking exactly to what Jeff's saying. I'd like to see more of that in our downtown, and with the ground floor retail underneath it.
They have on-site parking.
They do, and I think our structure, our zoning should potentially, and on the south side in particular, it's tougher on the north, the south side, maybe we need to tighten this up where we're dealing with parking within those buildings, because it is doable.
Yeah,
on
one,
the south side of the property.
one of the plans was to come in off of Prospect and just
But I don't
use
wanna
that
get
for.
into
But
our site,
conceptually,
any
if we
site.
change, conceptually, if we change the zone, that would be a way to address that, one way of many, but, yeah.
I think Jerry's right, that we need to address parking too, because we don't want, 500 more cars on our streets.
So anyway, at this point, we're pretty buried in my office as far as doing anything right away about this, but I wanted to let you know about it so you could think about it, and if you have a recommendation for how we proceed, we can put it on the, list of things to do and try to address it, but, and we may want to, this may be something that we want to talk to outside parties and actually talk to a developer and talk to an architect and get, those types of opinions from the people who actually design projects versus us as people who review projects trying to create regulations based on our review needs as opposed to constructability.
I'm chair of the Housing Kitsap, and I know some of the folks over there would be glad to talk to you about, because we've just been through the Harborside condo debacle. And the reason, and I appreciate you guys' comments, but the last 2 units at Harborside that have been for sale over 4 years are small, affordable, under 600, right around 600 square feet, and they've dropped the price 3 times and still haven't got a buyer on them. So it isn't always the case that, just because they're, but anyway, that's a asset that we can tap as time goes on, to talk to those guys, because they've been through the fires and know what, the market's been doing the last couple of years. Be glad to set that
I
up.
just want to say something, which is I was intrigued by what you mentioned tonight about the form-based code. And I think we have part of it now where we have a design review board. So would that work in conjunction with the design review board where someone would propose what the building would look like in terms of style?
Well, yeah, you still have to comply to the exterior finish and the details that are specified in our code or through the design review process, but, rather, I think that because one side of Bay Street is radically different than the other in terms of what types of heights we want, I think that potentially you end up with a table for the downtown that has maybe 8 different downtown zones, and we draw a map that shows block by block where we want what type of building based on the existing sidewalk width, based on the terrain, the views, and other things. And it's, I think you need to get into that level of detail when you're planning in a really concentrated urban area where you're covering every lot, every square foot that's available with structure.
Well, what I like about this idea is that we are concerned about the appearance of the buildings, but we're sort of agnostic about what somebody puts inside their building. Whether it's 3 or 4 units, it may not make that much of a difference, but we do want the outside to have a certain quality look in conjunction with the themes that we like. So I think that's
The design review committee should not be responsible for density.
right.
That's our
Just the outside.
responsibility.
Yeah.
Yes.
And just a couple comments. I certainly concur with Jeff Sargent and Rob. I think the more people that you can get into the downtown area, there's a lot bigger benefit than just simply not having a car. The shops downtown, like most any town, needs people to come and spend their money and preferably not drive. So if folks are living down there, it's quite easy to walk across the street to the swim deck or over to the Port Orchard Market to buy your supplies or wherever. So I'm inclined to go with the more density down there that we could get, the better off we can.
Yeah, and I
Parking
think-
is going to be an issue. Parking might be feasible in 2 blocks of the downtown, but when you get to the eastern end or east of Sydney, it's a little bit more problematic trying to find on-site parking without, heaven forbid, we put driveways out onto Bay Street. And I believe, like you, it was the intent of the discussion when we talked about the DOT and their rules that the retail was not going to be required to provide parking, because in essence, they already have. The square footage of retail down there really isn't changed much if we maintain the first floor being retail.
Yeah, and I think the other component of that too is that having people living down there also allows businesses to stay open later.
Sure.
And that's one of the difficulties is people close up shop somewhat
Yeah.
early. And I get that.
I have visions of Westway having a grocery store again.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice?
Got a couple different clients that live on the waterfront in Tacoma where they've done exactly what we're talking about, and what they loved about it is, coming home from work and walking down to picking which one of the half dozen restaurants that are right there, within a block or two, going out to eat, and not having your car.
I would have much preferred that tonight instead of the cup of noodles that I had before this meeting.
That type of nightlife will spur more nightlife and more visitors to come in. Been to 6th Street downtown Denver, it's that way, it's Restaurant Row, and there's apartments above, and, every major kind of urban center like that I've been to, it's like that, that's what it's like. Bend, Oregon was the same way. It's kind of cool.
Nick, this isn't a comp plan change.
No, this is an amendment to the development regulations, and I think it would be consistent with the comp plan as is today. Unless, I suppose, I think the mixed use zone, I can't remember if it's a specific land use designation on the land use map or if it's part of the commercial land use designation, and so there's a chance that it may require a comp plan amendment if we change from mixed use to something else, but I think we just need to redevelop the mixed use code to have outside of downtown and then downtown and then little sub areas within downtown.
Okay.
Thank you for catching this and bringing it to our attention. I think there needs to be more dialogue.
And we need, whatever the rules are, we need them in black and white so that developers can say, this is what I'm playing with.
The other thing I would add that, all due respect, Mr. Mayor, that Housing Authority deals with their investment into developments, and that's kind of a public investment, if you will. They don't want to get too much involved in a private developer and what they require to get a return on investment. So I think, although they're a good resource and we should be chatting with them, I think that should be limited to just that. We should be trying to get input from other developers to see what their suggestions are.
All right, discussion item number 4, park rules, Mr. Bond.
Yes, so Mark Dorsey came into my office a couple weeks ago and said, what do you think of this park rule sign I want to put up at McCormick? And I immediately went to the code to see what our adopted parks rules were and didn't find any.
We don't have it.
So I went down and talked to the police and I said, how do you guys enforce park rules? And he said, well, we just only enforce things that are backed by the RCW. And so things like drinking in public and urinating in public and other things they can deal with. But if it's park hours or what you can and can't do in a park, they really can't write a ticket. They could use strong language or encourage somebody to stop doing what they're doing. But if they came to write a ticket, it would be difficult to defend or prosecute, I guess, prosecute in court. So the parks ordinance that we've prepared, this was vetted through the Public Properties Committee meeting. It would still need to have an attorney review it at this point, but everything is mostly borrowed from our surrounding jurisdictions, and we looked at all the possible, activities that we may want to discuss, such as fires, animals, whether they're on leash or off leash, and driving if you go off designated roadways and decide to tear up the lawn at one of our parks. All of those things need to be addressed locally, and I think this ordinance generally would do that, though I would just want our attorney to have a look through this and maybe make a couple of edits between now and consideration. But I think in the interim, Mr. Dorsey has ordered some temporary signs to put up that just generally tell people what is expected of them. But if we want to be able to enforce those rules and have permanent signs, we need something in the code. And so this is a first cut at that something, and if there's any concerns, I'm happy to change things. But I think the Public Properties Committee was comfortable with what was presented.
One thing that jumps out at me here is firecrackers. While I have a problem with fireworks at times, I think our pedestrian path is that part of our park. And I know Central Park is one of our parks, and it's, around 4th of July, everybody's lighting off fireworks in our parks. So by this ordinance, then we're outlawing fireworks in our parks.
Actually, where's fireworks?
It's under.
Firearms and explosives.
Says firecrackers, rockets.
Well, trying to be consistent, I'm not in favor of this at all, and the reason I'm not is because, as you say at the start, behavior and activity in city parks has not been problematic enough to make this a barrier to law enforcement, and I kind of look at that, and our citizens aren't out there tearing up the parks, they aren't out there doing the wrong things, and this feels so onerous. It feels like you'd walk into a park, but don't touch it. And by all means, don't bring anything, because it's probably going to be illegal. Don't bring your Frisbee and try and throw that, because you're going to get hammered for that. I mean, I read through this, and I thought, why would I ever go to a park if I knew these rules? It's just, to me, it's onerous. And, maybe everybody loves rules. I hate rules, because I think rules just make life miserable for the average person who just wants to live. So that's my thought.
Not quite that extreme, but there are things that concern me in this. I mean, I think we should have rules about alcohol in our parks. Parks are for the kids, a lot of it. I mean, and it's probably not where we want people consuming alcohol. There are components of this, I think, that are needed, in particular for enforcement purposes, but I have some concerns.
Well, right here it says too, it says firecrackers torpedo. How many times have you seen a torpedo being, So I think it needs to be wordsmithed considerably to fit our, to fit our
No,
circumstances.
that language can change. For example, it doesn't even say fireworks, but it says things that are obviously fireworks. I'm in the middle, because I understand what Jerry's saying is that we assume that our parks don't have problems. I think maybe if there was one person there drinking alone at night and not bothering anyone else, would that be a problem if they were quiet about it? I don't know, so I'd say I'm neutral on that, but it's unfortunate that sometimes we have to tell people what common courtesy is, and I think that was the intent behind this. I don't think it was intended to be onerous.
I think if we read these rules and regulations to just go down in the park and just read them to people, hey, sit down, I want to tell you what our new rules are, they would walk away shaking their heads. That's how onerous I think they are.
I mean, I'm kind of ambivalent about the hours. Do we want people to leave when it's dusk? I know that's some parks, yes, but Central
But it's so
Playground.
pretty down on the waterfront that you'd be ashamed to deny people the chance to walk down along the water and look at the lights out on the bay. And
So,
I mean, I don't know.
let me chime in here, if I could.
Pick up your microphone.
Sorry.
About
Thank
that.
you. I agree that there's probably some language in here that obviously needs to be tweaked. We did ask it to go by the city attorney, but we don't have one right now. What I would like to make other comments on are like this issue of fires, Jerry. Do you think it's appropriate to have somebody start a campfire in the middle of the park? Right now they can, and there's nothing the cops can do about it.
But right now, they don't. That's
Well-
the point about rules, is nobody's doing
But if-
anything wrong.
but if
and all of a
somebody-
sudden, we're gonna put a bunch of rules in there.
But if somebody
there's not a
did,
problem.
that's the problem. If somebody did, there's nothing the cops could do about it. Camping,
Do they park their car in the park?
do we want our parks to turn into homeless camps? Well, you got to ask these questions. And if you don't have the rule, there's nothing you can do. And we all know you can't do anything after, do we want it to be a barn door policy or do we want to be proactive? It's not to say that the cops are going to go storming through the parks and pull these rules out and say, aha, somebody's throwing a Frisbee, because that's not in here. But, we got to start somewhere. And this only came about when we asked to put the McCormick Woods Park up. And what do we want happening out at McCormick Woods? What are the rules? We don't have rules. Let's see what other cities have. This is what other cities have. We can go, helter-skelter, Wild West out there, but, we need to start somewhere, I think. before we do have problems. Didn't we just have an issue with a dog attacking a kid in our park? We did. So, it's time.
If it was a dog.
The other comment that I would make to that is, if we think about the McCormick Woods Park in relationship to our other parks, Central Park or Clayton Park, I don't think these things would happen. I don't think these things would necessarily be onerous at the Active Club Park. But when we've got McCormick Woods Park that is much larger, and as we develop Paul Powers Park and even the Van Zee Park, I think that rules are appropriate. I didn't see anything in here that I felt was onerous. I felt most everything in here was common sense.
I'm a little curious on this watercraft restrictions, because we have the DeKalb Street Pier that's part of the park system. And it says, it's got a caveat there that says, except at places set apart for such purposes by the city and so designated by signs. So we can get by with that. We could, but we're gonna have 2 pocket parks hopefully as time goes on, that you can bring a kayak in and launch a kayak. So you just have to be careful. I kind of agree with you. At some point you have to let us breathe and live too. So there's got to be some kind of happy medium. And next week after Tuesday, hopefully, if you guys would rather make it at the end of this week, you get back to me and tell me what you think of the 2 folks I'm proposing to engage temporarily. I could have it by Monday. I can have them both engaged, and we'll have an opinion.
I didn't get a consent. I don't know what we want to do.
I think it sounds like there's enough concerns on this that it would be appropriate for everybody to just provide me with comments on this and get back to me.
Yeah.
And then we'll take it back to public properties for discussion and figure out where people are at on things. And
One thing I can add, and not to repeat what everyone else has said, but the intent, it was started because there needed to be a sign at McCormick. And then the idea was to make it uniform for all city parks, not just that one park. So there are some things here that may be more appropriate for different parks. And that's something else we can talk about, that some of them you may not want to bring up, like fireworks, for example.
Thank you for clarifying. Thank you, Fred, because that's what the intent was, that we would have a universal set of park rules and then modify as necessary at an individual park.
Yeah, and you may want to go park by park and say that fireworks aren't appropriate at McCormick because of a fire risk, but they are appropriate somewhere else. And so some of these may need to be tailored to specific parks.
Like the one about picking up after your animals, that should have its own sign. It shouldn't be buried in a sign with 12 other items, in my opinion.
Well, and then
The way
can
we-
everybody
the way it
get
is,
back to
actually.
you
Yeah, I think everybody
with
just needs to-
suggestions and.
And if you'd like, I'm not sure if you've got a Word version of this or a PDF, but I can get you the Word version if you prefer to
Redline
type
it?
comments, yeah.
Has the police department reviewed these?
We discussed it with them early on in the process, but I don't think they have reviewed it, certainly since it went to public properties. It was before public
I think
properties.
it would be a good idea to have them review them, because there are some in there that I think it's unrealistic to believe we're going to be able to enforce somebody not smoking in the parking lot of a park. As an example.
In their car.
In their car.
Or unlawful to practice some of these sports. That's, I think of parks as where we do practice some of the sports, and I can understand the common sense of not having golf balls being driven around.
Although I'd like to do that.
Yeah,
And archery,
And
but,
I was gonna,
but, in
Baseball?
general, that's where you go to practice.
I had a problem.
Wiffle ball, or whatever these kids are doing, because they have no place to do it in their yards, because there's no yard. So, some of this to me is like, what? This is not common sense.
Okay.
I agree, I think some does need to be added. I agree with that.
Yeah.
All right, now we're at, we ran out of items, so for the good of the order, do we have anything else? Mr. Martin?
The auditor's in, the council finance committees, they meet on, it's October 2nd at 8 a.m. with the regional audit manager. Budgets are back from departments. They're being put together. The mayor's going to interview next week the department heads, and we'll put together the final preliminary budget and transmit it to council members right after the 1st of October.
On schedule.
Yes, or, and we are very busy. Having the auditors there, we're sometimes writing the budget.
Anything else?